Mom said, "This table is for family only," and looked down on me. I just smiled and left in silence. It was a night like any other. The city lights outside the windows flickered in a quiet dance, a backdrop to the extravagant dinner that awaited us inside. The Grand Restaurant was the kind of place people only visited on special occasions, and tonight was one. It was supposed to be about celebration, about family, but for me, it would only be about rejection. I stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses and soft jazz playing in the background. The hostess greeted my mother with a polite smile and ushered us to our table. The others had already arrived. Nathan, my perfect older brother, and Ivy, my younger sister, who always got the attention. They were all seated at the grand table, the one with white linens and golden trim. I walked over, scanning for a seat. I didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to make a fuss. But as soon as my eyes met my mother's, I knew it wasn't going to be a normal night. "Oh, sweetheart," she said loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "This table's for family only." She gestured behind her, not at the table I was supposed to join, but at a lonely fold-out chair wedged beside a service station near the trash. I blinked, my stomach twisting into knots, waiting for someone to speak up, to say it was all a joke. But no one did. My brother, Nathan, didn't even look up. Ivy just adjusted her dress and pretended to ignore me. I stood frozen for a second, feeling the weight of their laughter like 1,000 tiny daggers. And then I walked to the chair. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Not even my father, who sat at the head of the table, his attention solely on his glass of wine. I sat, the metal of the chair cold against my skin, and glanced around. The table before me was elegant. Crystal glasses, pristine plates, and delicate napkins. But my view? A stained wall and the clattering of dishes being thrown away behind me. The hum of the restaurant was drowned out by the buzz of my own thoughts. I smiled as the waiter approached, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Sparkling water," I said, forcing the words out, trying to make it seem like I belonged. He nodded and walked away, but I barely heard him. All I could hear was my mother's voice in my head, her words echoing, cold and indifferent. I should have left. I should have gotten up and walked out, but I didn't. I stayed there, staring at my napkin, listening to the laughter and conversations that didn't include me. For once, I didn't fight back. I didn't try to insert myself into their world. I let the silence swallow me whole. The dinner passed in a blur. The meal was extravagant. Steaks, seafood towers, wine that cost more than my rent. I didn't touch half of it. How could I? I wasn't even supposed to be at that table, not really. I was an inconvenience to be dealt with. I glanced over at my mother a few times, hoping to catch her eye, to see some flicker of warmth or acknowledgement. But she was too busy talking to Nathan and Ivy, too absorbed in the world that I would never be a part of. Even the waiter seemed to avoid looking my way as he passed with more food and drinks for the others. And then, the moment I had been dreading came. The check. The waiter came to the table with the leather folder, placing it in front of my mother. Without hesitation, Victoria looked at me and said, "You're paying, right? Didn't you say you've got money now?" She smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was a sharp, cutting comment disguised as a question. My heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on me. I looked at the bill. $4,600. It was more than I had made in a month, more than I could have ever dreamed of spending in one evening. I hadn't ordered most of it. I'd barely even touched my food. But the laughter still rang in my ears, and for a moment I wondered if they could see how much it hurt. I took a deep breath. And then I said it, slowly, calmly, without a hint of hesitation. "That's not my table." The waiter blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" I looked up at him and repeated, my voice low but clear. "I'm not with them." I turned to face my mother and the rest of the table, their eyes wide and shocked. "I wasn't invited," I said, pushing my chair back. I wasn't welcomed. I was humiliated. I won't pay for this dinner. None of this is mine. Nathan chuckled, the sound bitter. Wow, dramatic much? I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone else. I just stood up, smoothing my dress as I did. My legs were shaking, but I held my head high as I walked away. The click of my heels echoed in the silence as I passed the empty tables, past the chandelier that hung like a gaudy symbol of their world. I reached the door, but before I opened it, I turned around one last time. Their faces were frozen, mouths open, forks midair. The tension in the room could have been sliced with a knife. I wasn't sure if they were more shocked by my words or the fact that I'd finally said them. I opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit my skin like a slap, and for the first time, I felt something. Not pain, not humiliation, but freedom. I hadn't begged to be accepted. I hadn't played their game. I had simply walked away. That night, something changed inside me. It wasn't just the end of dinner. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I wasn't going to let them write it. Emma walked out of the restaurant, her heart racing, not with shame, but with something else she hadn't felt around them in a long time. Freedom. For once, she hadn't begged to be accepted. She hadn't played the part. She had simply walked away. And that somehow felt richer than any bank account balance she'd ever earned. After leaving that dinner, I knew I had to build something for myself, with no one's approval and no one's help. It's been a year since I walked out of that restaurant. A year since I decided to stop pretending I belonged. A year since I stopped chasing after the love and recognition I would never get. I could still remember the taste of humiliation on my tongue, but now it felt distant, almost as if it belonged to someone else. The city outside my small apartment window was alive, but I didn't feel part of it. My days were consumed with one thing: work. And after everything that had happened, work was all I had left. I woke up early every morning, the sound of the alarm cutting through the silence of my tiny one-bedroom apartment. The walls were thin, and the building creaked in the cold mornings, but it was mine. The cluttered desk in the corner, the cheap furniture, the windowsill I used to store my plants, all of it was a reminder that I was still here. I was still fighting. I could have gone back to my family. I could have begged for their forgiveness and tried to slot myself back into their world of expectations and indifference. But that was never going to happen. I wasn't going to beg them to see my worth. I had to build something for myself. No one could help me, and frankly, no one ever had. The real estate job wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. It felt like scraping the bottom of the barrel, yet it was more than I'd ever been offered by anyone in my family. I hadn't gone to college for this. I hadn't spent years building connections in this industry. But I had a relentless drive that they had never understood, and it was finally mine to use. I spent my days in a small cubicle, typing away at leads, making calls, doing everything I could to prove that I could make it on my own. I was a small fish in a big pond, but I had no intention of staying small for long. My colleagues were a mix of indifferent faces, but there was one woman, Nina, who became a quiet ally. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. We spent our lunches together, discussing deals, sales tactics, and life outside of the office. She didn't ask me about my family, and I didn't volunteer anything. That was the way I liked it. But it wasn't easy. Each deal was a battle. Each rejection was a blow, but I took it. I moved on. No one cared to ask about my past, and I was glad for that. They didn't know about the family I'd walked away from, the ones who had laughed at my expense, who had made me feel small for so long. They only saw me as a colleague, someone they could rely on, and that was enough. I struggled for months. Bills piled up, and I couldn't afford luxury. There were days I ate ramen for dinner just to make ends meet. But I didn't care. I couldn't afford to care. I had a dream now, and no matter how small, it was mine. Then one day it happened. I signed my first contract. A small one, but it was a step. It was a victory. I held the paperwork in my hands, staring at the numbers on the page, wondering if they were real. The commission wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that I could do this. That I wasn't just pretending, that I wasn't fooling myself. I was building something real. That night, I allowed myself a small celebration. I made dinner for myself. Nothing fancy, but something that felt like a treat. A glass of wine, my favorite playlist in the background, and for once, I felt like I deserved it. This was my success. I was doing it on my own. No help from my family, no one else to lean on. Just me. But then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, and for a moment I thought about ignoring it. But something told me to pick up. Emma? It was Lily's voice, my younger sister. I hadn't heard from her in months. Lily? I asked, almost unsure it was really her. Yeah, it's me, she replied. Listen, I know it's been a while, and I just wanted to say, we've missed you. She hesitated, and I could almost hear her shifting nervously on the other end. Mom and Dad, they've been asking about you. They want you to come back. They're sorry about what happened. I didn't say anything for a long moment. The words echoed in my mind, but none of them felt like they belonged to me. They wanted me to come back. After everything, after all the years of dismissing me, of making me feel like I was less than them, now they wanted me back? I felt something shift inside me. Anger? Sadness? No, it was something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. The pull of the past. The life I had walked away from. The family that I had left behind. They're having a big family party, Lily continued, and they want you to come. Please, Em. It's been too long. I closed my eyes, the words stinging. I could hear the faint sounds of my sister's voice, pleading. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. But I couldn't shake the thought. Should I go back? Should I return to them? To the life that had rejected me? Or should I stay on this new path I had carved? A path that was hard and lonely, but felt true to who I had become? Thanks for calling, Lily, I said, my voice quiet. I'll think about it. The call ended, and I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. My thoughts were swirling, and I knew I couldn't avoid this decision forever. But for now, I would let it sit. Just for a little while longer. The family invites Emma to a big party, but she doesn't know what to do. Return to them, or continue on the path she has chosen. You never forget the way your family looks at you. And I knew the moment I walked in, nothing had changed. The air in the mansion smelled like expensive perfume, leather, and polished wood. Everything in the house gleamed under the chandelier's golden light, as though it had been carefully designed to give off the illusion of perfection. But I knew better. I had walked through this door 1,000 times before, and each time I was reminded of how small I felt here. The polished floors, the pristine furniture, the laughter echoing through the hallways. None of it ever made me feel like I belonged. Not really. And now, as I stepped back into this familiar yet foreign space, I was struck by a brutal truth. Nothing had changed. Nothing at all. The invitation had been brief, as cold and calculated as everything else in this house. We're having a family gathering. It's been a while. Come if you want to. Of course I came. I was curious. But more than that, I wanted to see them. I needed to face the people who had once been my family and see for myself if anything had changed. If they had changed. But deep down, I knew the answer. They hadn't. As I walked through the doors, the room fell silent for a split second. The usual chatter about vacations, business deals, and Ivy's latest shopping spree quieted. Their eyes, sharp, calculating, indifferent, settled on me as if I were an unwelcome guest. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with unspoken words. There they were, my family. Victoria, my mother, was sitting at the center of the room. Her smile, which once felt like a soft caress, now appeared strained, like it was held together by thin threads of politeness. She wasn't happy to see me. I could see it in her eyes. An expression that said, "Why are you here?" Nathan, my older brother, was standing with his back to me. engrossed in a conversation with someone about the latest tech gadget. I watched him, and for a moment, I thought I could see the same smugness in his posture, the same arrogance that had always made him the golden child. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Then there was Ivy, my younger sister, perched on the armrest of a chair, her eyes barely flicking in my direction. She was scrolling through her phone as usual. When she finally glanced up, it was with the same dismissive look she had always given me, as though I was a distant relative she barely remembered. I was back in their world, and yet I was more alone than ever. I tried to join their conversations, but it felt like I was invisible. I laughed at jokes they didn't expect me to get. I asked about the things they'd been up to, only to receive short answers that told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't a part of their lives. Not really. I was just someone they had to put up with because of the blood between us. The longer I stood there, trying to insert myself into the conversations, the more I realized that none of this had ever been for me. I wasn't part of their world, no matter how much I tried. They had their own lives, their own interests, and they didn't need me to complete their picture. I felt my chest tighten, a wave of frustration rising within me. I had hoped that, maybe this time, things would be different. I had hoped they would see me for who I was now, not who they wanted me to be. But the truth was staring me in the face. They never would. It was then, in the middle of a conversation I wasn't even really part of, that I made a decision. I was done. Done with trying to fit into their world. Done with begging for their approval. I had fought for so long to make them see me, but now I understood. They weren't going to change. And neither was I. Enough, I whispered to myself. I stood up, cutting through the conversation like a knife. The room went silent as everyone turned to face me. Victoria's eyes narrowed, as if she was waiting for me to say something that would make her proud. But I wasn't about to do that. "Mom," I said, my voice clear, steady. "I'm not here for your approval. I don't need your acceptance anymore." The words came out before I had time to second-guess them. I was tired. Tired of hiding behind smiles, tired of pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. Victoria's expression hardened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the others as if seeking their support. But no one spoke. No one came to my defense. They just watched, like they always had. And then, the words I had known were coming, but still felt like a slap in the face. "You don't belong here, Emma. You never did. Please just leave." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air, as sharp and cold as a blade. I felt a flicker of anger, but I pushed it down. I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb to it. To her. To them. I stood up, not even glancing at her again. The others might have expected me to plead, to beg for some shred of kindness. But I didn't. I didn't need it. Not anymore. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm but firm. I walked out of the room, past the empty glasses and half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. The silence of the house followed me, like the echo of all the years I had spent trying to be something I wasn't. I didn't look back. And as I reached the door, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the expectations. Free from the need to belong. Free from a family that had never truly seen me. The truth had settled in. I didn't need them to make me whole. I was whole on my own. Victoria asks Emma to leave, saying that she doesn't deserve to be there. Emma walks out confidently, not looking back. I had already walked away, but the silence of their judgment still echoed in my ears. I would show them that I didn't need them to succeed. The first few months after the party were a blur. I had cut myself off from my family completely. No more visits, no more calls, no more pretending. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their pity or their condescension. Every time I thought about calling them or showing up at one of their events, I remembered the look in my mother's eyes, the disdain in the way she told me to leave, and the relief that followed. I wasn't angry anymore. I had let go of the idea that they could ever truly see me, accept me, or love me the way I had once hoped. And it didn't matter. What mattered now was me. What mattered was how far I could go on my own. My life became a constant cycle of work, early mornings, late nights, and moments of quiet solitude. I had never truly been alone before. Even in the years I had spent living with them, I had always been surrounded by people, family, friends, acquaintances, but none of them had ever truly seen me for who I was. Now, in the silence of my tiny apartment and the relentless hum of my office, I finally felt like I could breathe. I worked harder than I ever had. At the real estate company, I was finally starting to make a name for myself. No longer was I the girl who had to fight to be noticed. Now I was the one making things happen, closing deals, and leaving a trail of success in my wake. I had started at the bottom, doing grunt work, making cold calls, tracking down leads, and pushing paperwork. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy. But I did it. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for handouts. I didn't expect anything from anyone. I just worked. The work paid off. Slowly, steadily, I began to climb the ladder. My boss noticed my dedication. My colleagues started to respect me, and I no longer felt like an outsider in the office. I was someone they could count on. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged. Not because of who I was related to, but because of who I had become on my own. One day, I found myself in the conference room, signing my first big contract. $1 million deal. It wasn't the most lucrative contract ever, but to me, it felt like I had just signed the first step toward the future I had dreamed of. I had done it, all by myself. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the contract in my hands. The paper was thick, real, and in that moment, I realized that the life I had fought for was here. I had created this success. No one had given it to me. No one had held my hand and told me I could do it. I had built it from nothing. As I looked around the room, I saw the respect in my colleagues' eyes. They had witnessed my transformation. They knew the hard work I had put in. And as much as I hated to admit it, I could feel the satisfaction of having earned their respect. But even more than that, I felt proud of myself. This was mine. No one could take it from me. I wasn't sure how much time passed before I checked my phone. My hands were still trembling with excitement, and I needed to share the news. But when I saw the notification, my heart sank. A missed call from Victoria. I stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing the button to call her back. I didn't know why I felt compelled to answer. Part of me thought it would be better to leave it be, to ignore the call and move on. But something inside me made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady despite the gnawing feeling in my stomach. "Emma?" came her voice, the coldness still present, but now tinged with something else, perhaps desperation. "It's your mother. We need your help." I couldn't breathe. The words felt like they were suffocating me. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. I didn't want her to see that she could still get to me. We've had some financial trouble," she continued, her voice tighter now. "Your father's investments haven't gone as planned, and things are getting difficult. We need you. We need your help." I stared out the window, the weight of the moment settling over me. The city below felt distant, almost unreal. Here I was, having built something for myself from scratch, and they were asking me to come back, to help them. After everything, I could feel the bitterness rise in my throat. They hadn't cared about me when I needed them. They had cast me aside as if I were nothing more than a nuisance, a disappointment. And now, when they needed me, they expected me to drop everything and save them. I stayed silent for a moment, my mind racing. "We're sorry, Emma," Victoria said, her voice softening. "Please, come back. We can fix this together. You're part of the family." That was it. The final push. I realized that no matter how hard they tried, they would never see me as anything more than a tool to fix their problems. They never truly saw me. They never cared to. "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold now, clear. I don't think I can help you. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she would argue, plead with me, but she didn't. Goodbye, I said, hanging up the phone without another word. The quiet in my apartment felt different now, but not in a bad way. It felt freeing. I had made my decision. I didn't need them. I never did. After signing the contract, Emma receives a call from Victoria, her mother, saying that the family is having a hard time and wants her to come back to help. They thought they could buy me, but they didn't realize I had already built my own empire. It had been a year since I walked away from everything. A year since I cut myself off from the family that had never truly seen me. And a year since I decided that I could make it on my own. The silence of my apartment was now a comfort, not an emptiness, and my small victories in the real estate business had accumulated into something real, something I was proud of. No more pretending to be something I wasn't. No more seeking approval from people who never would, who never could, truly understand me. I had become someone new, someone stronger. I didn't need them to feel validated anymore. But even with all my progress, the phone call I had received just days ago from Victoria, my mother, still echoed in my mind. "We need your help," she had said, her voice strained. "Your father's investments have failed and the family's in financial trouble. We need you to come back. You're part of the family, Emma." The words still burned when I thought about them. The truth was unmistakable now. They didn't want me back because they missed me. They wanted me because they needed someone to fix their mess, someone to pull them out of the hole they had dug themselves into. They were the same people who had thrown me away without a second thought. And now, when they needed help, they saw me as nothing more than a tool. They thought they could buy me, manipulate me into coming back and fixing things for them. But they didn't realize something. I had already built my own empire. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had earned everything I had, and I wasn't about to let them take it from me again. But something in me stirred. Maybe it was the way my mother's voice had cracked with desperation, or how Nathan and Ivy's cold indifference seemed to reach through the phone line. Maybe it was the part of me that needed closure, needed to show them that I didn't need them. Not now and not ever. I agreed to meet them. I wasn't going back to help. I wasn't going back for them. I was going back to show them exactly what they had lost when they chose to treat me like an afterthought, to prove that I had moved beyond their reach. I was going back for one thing: revenge. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about status or power. It was about control. It was about taking back what they had tried to strip from me all those years. The power to define my own worth, the ability to stand on my own, and the strength to walk away when no one else would. I arrived at their house, a place that had never felt like home. The grandeur of it always seemed to mock me, like it was trying to make up for the coldness that lived within its walls. This time, the atmosphere felt even colder, if that was even possible. I entered through the familiar door, the one that I had walked through countless times as a child, the one that had always led to a place where I was expected to be something I wasn't. Now, as I stood there, a sense of familiarity mixed with the bitterness of everything I had left behind. Victoria was already waiting for me in the living room, her arms crossed and her eyes narrowed. She hadn't changed, still the same icy authority that had always made me feel small. Ethan and Ivy were there too, standing off to the side, neither offering a smile or a greeting. They had clearly been briefed on my return, but there was no warmth in their eyes. "Emma, thank you for coming," Victoria said, her voice cold but not as sharp as usual. She had probably rehearsed the lines 100 times. "We need your help. We're in deep financial trouble, and we thought you might be able to help us get out of this mess." I stayed silent for a long moment, letting the words hang in the air. They thought they could just pull me back in with their problems, with their crises, but I wasn't a fool anymore. "I'm not here to help you," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "I'm here to make sure you understand something." Victoria looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Understand what? I'm not your safety net, I replied. I'm not here to fix what you broke. You wanted me to fail. You thought I would always be the one you could throw aside when you didn't need me. But that's not who I am anymore. I could feel their eyes on me. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, and Ivy, who was used to being the favorite, looked at me with disdain. Emma, we didn't mean for it to happen like that, Victoria said, her voice faltering just a little. I'm your mother. I love you. The words didn't move me anymore. I had heard them too many times to believe them. They loved me when it was convenient, when they needed me to do something for them. But when it mattered, when I needed them to see me, they were blind to who I really was. I know you want me to feel guilty, I said, stepping forward. But I don't. You pushed me away, and now I'm the one who's in control of my life. Not you. Not anyone. The room was silent. Victoria's face flushed, her pride stung. Ethan looked uncomfortable, and Ivy just stood there, arms crossed. But there was a flicker of something. Maybe regret, maybe guilt in her eyes. But that wasn't enough. They couldn't just apologize, not for everything that had happened, not for the way they had treated me. They had taken me for granted for too long. Now, it was my turn to stand tall. I turned to Victoria, who was still standing with her arms crossed, her posture defensive. You never cared about me the way you care about your money, I said. And I'm done trying to make you see me. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. You're being unreasonable, Emma. You owe us. No, I cut her off. I owe you nothing. You've taken enough from me already. I'm done. I could see the anger and frustration building in her, but I wasn't afraid of it. I was finally free of them, free of their expectations, free of their manipulation. After the meeting, Victoria tries to convince Emma to return to her family, but Emma decides to leave. The relationship is officially over. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to show them that I could be better than they ever imagined. It was the end of 2024, and I had finally reached the point I had been dreaming of. The months of hard work, sleepless nights, and determination had paid off. My name had become synonymous with success in the real estate world. The contracts, the negotiations, the deals, everything was coming together in a way I had never imagined when I walked away from my family. I had no regrets. Today was the culmination of everything I had worked for. I was standing at the front of a conference hall filled with people from the real estate industry, my team behind me, their faces a mixture of awe and respect. This was my moment, the moment I had earned by proving to everyone, including myself, that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. The conference was a big deal. I had just signed a contract to buy a major real estate company, a company that would cement my place in the market. The deal was worth millions, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly arrived. The applause from the audience was like a distant hum as I stood at the podium, smiling. This wasn't just a business achievement. This was a personal victory. It was my proof to the world and to my family that I could be more than they ever thought I could be. I could be better. As the event wound down, I excused myself to meet with my colleagues. We had worked long hours to get here, and they had been with me through every challenge, every rejection, every late night. They deserved to be part of this victory, and so we decided to throw a small celebration. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a gathering in the conference room, some wine, music, and good food. It was my way of saying thank you to the people who had supported me along the way, who had believed in me when I had nothing. But there was one thing missing from the celebration. My family. I didn't invite them, of course. Why would I? They had never truly been a part of my success. They had never seen me for who I was or who I could be. They had always looked down on me, made me feel less than I was, and I wasn't going to let that influence me anymore. The party was for the people who mattered. My colleagues, my friends, the ones who had stood by me. I sat back in my chair, surveying the room filled with laughter and conversation. It felt good. It felt right. This was my world now. and I was in control of it. No more waiting for approval. No more trying to earn their love. I had everything I needed right here, right now. But just as the party was at its peak, my phone buzzed on the table in front of me. I picked it up and saw the name, Victoria. I felt a twinge of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps annoyance. But I didn't immediately open the message. I let it sit there for a moment, as if waiting for me to decide whether or not it was worth responding to. I knew what it was going to say. She was going to ask for something. She always did. Finally, I opened the message. It was brief, the words blunt and to the point. "We're having a family meeting tomorrow. We need to talk. Please come." I stared at the text, my finger hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, I thought about replying, about telling her that I was done, that I had nothing left to say to her or to any of them. But then I realized something. I didn't need to reply. I didn't need to explain myself. She had lost her chance to be a part of my life when she chose to treat me like I was invisible, like I was nothing. So I smiled. And then I set my phone down without a word. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I had already let go of that part of my life. The message, the invitation, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had built something far more valuable than any family connection. I had built my own empire. I had achieved everything on my own, without needing their validation. As the night wore on and the laughter of my colleagues filled the room, I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction of the moment settle in. This was it. This was the life I had always dreamed of, and I had earned every second of it. The door to my past was closed. And as for my family, they could stay behind it, waiting for a call that would never come. While everyone is celebrating, Emma receives a text message from Victoria, inviting her to a family meeting tomorrow. However, Emma just smiles and does not reply. Emma had walked away from her family once and for all, realizing that the power she needed to thrive came from within, not from the hollow approval of those who never cared to see her worth. Through silence and distance, she had found strength. Strength to prove that her success was hers to claim, and hers alone. In the end, justice doesn't come naturally. It's earned, fought for, and sometimes it's delayed. But when it arrives, it resonates deeply, echoing through every part of our lives. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes just one bold step can change the course of a life that's been trampled. Emma's journey proves that we don't need others to define us. Our true power lies in our ability to stand tall and walk our own path, free from the expectations of those who never believed in us.